Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Round-Up, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for The Cradle. As usual, I am joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for The Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for The Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. So first of all, we want to wish Eid Mubarak to everyone who is celebrating today. And we also want to thank everyone who joined last night our very first space on X, where we discussed the topic of whether there's going to be a war or no war on the Lebanese border. It was a space co-hosted by The Cradle with Lebanese journalist Hala Jaber, and we had the presence of several of our columnists, including Mohamed Soidan, Khalil Harb, as well as Lebanese journalist Elijah Magnier, and Hezbollah Member of Parliament Ibrahim Moussaoui, who spoke about the current situation in the border, right? And now this space was part of our efforts, as we talked about last week, to expand a bit, the reach of the Cradle, try to reach more of an audience.
And inform in English, because there is so little information, I think, that goes deeper into the weeds, just punchline kind of headlines and news stories on the region. So that was important, but I think to have Ibrahim Moussaoui, like you said, a Hezbollah MP, and formerly the official spokesman for Hezbollah. So I met him years ago, 2009. He was the official spokesman, so he knows a lot about the situation. Of course, any representative of Hezbollah, even a government one, will be limited by what they can say. But he spoke very powerfully on the war drums that Israel's beating. He's like, let them come. Let them. Like, do they even understand?
We're going to put the link to this space under this video, so you can go check it out if you didn't last night. And I just want to highlight something that you already said, Sharmin, that it's, our focus is to inform. Our focus is to give a space, no pun intended, to these voices that in regular English and speaking Western media, they would really never find, such a space. And when they do, it's usually confrontational, right? It's usually, do you condemn Hamas?
Yeah.
It's never, what is the reality? Tell us about the reality. So, make sure to check that out. We had a few technical glitches. It's a bit choppy.
Mega technical glitches. We had to take the space down twice and reset it.
Yeah, so you will find it there. And make sure to check it out. It was a very interesting discussion. And again, the topic, is there going to be a war with Lebanon? Is there not going to be a war with Lebanon? Because Israel, as you said, they are just publicly, the public statements, it's we need to march on the north, etc. It's been the same thing since October the 8th. But in reality, internally, there's a lot of complaining going on. Yeah. There's a lot of anger, a lot of discontent, and a lot of this, is just this sense of overall failure that is going on with the Israeli army. They keep talking about an enlistment crisis. We don't have enough soldiers. They are going to create a division that now includes reservists that go beyond the retirement age. They are saying, in Gaza, the resistance is kind of like replenishing itself. Although the Israeli army is always like their losses, I don't remember what the official number of losses that they talk about. It's maybe 600?
I think they said 600 just recently since the onset of the war. Of course, the resistance says that number is in the thousands. I don't know that either one of those numbers are, verifiable in any way, and maybe exaggerate. Israel on the low side, resistance on the high side. But I do suspect it's higher than 600. Just based on, video footage we've seen and reports we've gotten.
Not even just like the fact that they are so questioning about the strategy and the protests and the demands, there's parents of soldiers within the Israeli army writing these letters saying, move our kids further back from the Lebanese border. They're in danger there. They need to demobilize. I think all of these speaks to their official death toll being fabrication. Because there wouldn't be this much discontent, there wouldn't be these many questions about whether we have enough troops or not to continue a war if the losses were this small. And then if it's not just about the losses, then what is it about? Like, are just people not willing to serve?
I think before we even delve deeper into Israel's troop deficiencies, we should just reflect a little bit on the question that was asked on the Cradle Space last night, which was war or no war. And despite now, why is there a feeling of war? Because the Western media headlines just amplify every Israeli official statement, pushing for war or try. And these are just messages. Let's not forget the half of what governments say, more than half, are just positioning themselves, for their constituents to maybe deter the enemy. This does not work with the resistance, by the way. I mean, the more Israel's banging on about war, the more they're getting hit by Hezbollah and, with quality targets. So it doesn't work. But one of the speakers said yesterday that there's direct messaging between Hezbollah and Israel. Like, what? And he said, but it is in the form of military strikes, that each other fully well understand the intention of each strike and the message each strike is sending. I mean, it's literally a military language between these two, sparred for so long in various disputes and just border skirmishes. So it's so important. The end result of that 2.5-hour space was that right now, despite Israel's sort of bullshit talk, they are both very much engaged in an incremental, very calculated, very controlled escalation. Nobody is expecting a massive strike by the other. And so that's important. Just to answer the question, it was kind of a consensus because everyone who was on the show pretty much who spoke was a Lebanese expert. To be honest, they spoke, it wasn't, what side they were on, but they spoke very, very helpfully about the ins and outs of this conflict, what the limitations are, what the likelihood is, where we were at the moment, and where we're going. So, but I think, the Hezbollah MP, Ibrahim Moussaoui, kind of said it, like, let them come. I mean, nobody thinks if they're losing this badly in Gaza, where they were boasting about taking out a lot of Hamas's capabilities, that Hamas has now come back. And the other thing that was mentioned by the Ibrahim Moussaoui was that the Gaza resistance is constantly in the process of replenishing their munitions. It didn't stop because of war. They're constantly in the process. So you use some, you replenish them, which is kind of not how we thought that would be because Israel is hitting every structure in sight, So to hear that that's going on, it has been going on throughout these 8 months, is quite astounding. Yeah. But, back to the front. So now we have this last weekend, 11 funerals of Israeli soldiers held in Israel. 8 of them killed in one tank explosion that set the occupation forces on fire, burnt them to a crisp, and
it was in a very impressive ambush in central Gaza, actually in the same location where the Flower Massacre took place.
Yeah, that could be symbolic, but who knows?
I mean, I think what happened, it is pretty symbolic. The resistance always seems to work in this way, even with what you're saying about the replenishing of the ammunition. They always seem to be thinking several steps ahead, and that is also the truth in the north, where I saw a few because these reports in Israeli media, they just are popping up more and more frequently. Some, I think Israeli channel 12 or 13 was talking about that some of the targets that Hezbollah has hit, they are of large importance to the level that they can even disclose what it was. You know what I mean? Like when they talk about we establish new intelligence installations and then they go and they bomb it. How do they know that these are new intelligence installations? And they keep talking about these kind of things, or they talk about the air bases. And because last week Hezbollah hit an air base that is in the furthest point north, where Israel has jets and drones stationed. So like you said, it's qualitative, quantitative, these are words beloved by the resistance in describing their attacks against the Israeli army. And then the latest thing that happened internally in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu just dissolved the war cabinet. He just dissolves this war cabinet, and he says that it's in response to Benny Gantz resigning last week, which we discussed it in the previous episode. But what's interesting about this was kind of like expected, no? Because Benny Gantz resigns with this other official from his party, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, the most extremist of Netanyahu's coalition, they want in. They just want to take over these 2 seats. What does Netanyahu do in the response? He just dissolves the war cabinet, and then he announces that there's not going to be another war cabinet, that decisions are going to be made in smaller forums, like private little meetings that will not, expressly saying they will not include Itamar Ben-Gvir.
I think that's his excuse not to have a war cabinet that curtails him. I mean, we're now looking at Netanyahu unplugged, moving forward. So, it'll be very interesting because and Israel is now calling for elections, but polls showing that Netanyahu would still win the majority of votes. Not majority of votes, but
his part.
Yeah.
Yes, and actually the polls are kind of week by week they're changing. And that also tells you to the level of discontent inside Israeli society. Because one week, yes, Netanyahu is the preferred choice. Then the next week, all of a sudden, Gantz is above. So it just keeps going like that. And I just want to point something out. Israelis are protesting, demanding new elections. Over the past 5 years, Israel has had 5 elections. How is a 6th one going to solve anything?
It's not. I mean, but let's note that this kind of Israeli discontent was apparent well before October 7th. Yeah. And I think October 7th has just exposed more of Israel's vulnerabilities, caused more chaos internally. And, this is where the resistance axis just gets to sit back and watch the enemy collapse from within. It's clearly something they don't even mind provoking when necessary. I mean, what happened last weekend, for Israelis who think their soldiers cannot die, and for the Israeli government that doesn't even like to mention that their soldiers die. It's very much a thing since W. Bush's wars, where they refused to anymore to allow videos of returning coffins being televised. So now Western governments waging war don't disclose their deaths, their casualties. It's notable that when the Israelis said over 600 soldiers have been killed since October 7th, that's double the amount that they say were killed during October 7th, which reminds me of the American fiasco after 9/11, where 3,000 Americans were killed in the towers collapsing. But more than double that number were killed in Iraq.
Yeah.
American soldiers. So what's the point of this? I mean, really. But I think it's so important because part of our discussion on space is Israel's incapabilities, okay? Israel's inability to wage war in the way it would like to in the past. One really important point is the Israelis are now the Israeli military announced it's going to set up a new recruitment service that goes over the retirement age of 40.
And a new military division of the reservists that, will be serving after the retirement age, essentially.
Yes. So extending service. I mean, like in the Syrian war, we had some of these guys serving for 7 years and then even longer. So is this what Israelis have signed up for as Israeli citizens? I don't think so. I mean, really, if you go to Israel today, young people are more interested in Tinder and going to the beach. It's just how it is. These are not the Zionist fighters of yesteryear who were willing to, lose life and limb in order to establish their ideological state. These are very plump and complacent populations that have now had generations of relative peace. The Israeli army does not have a tested fighting force. Right. We're seeing a lot of young men, 19 and upward, getting killed in Gaza, right?
Yes.
Why are they sending these guys who have no experience into the battlefield? And what are they going to do with, how are they going to tackle the fact that the Israeli military has never, ever had a protracted conflict a war of attrition since before the establishment of the state in 1948, where they had many, many, many months and even years of conflict gearing up to their seizing of the state, right? They have never had a war of attrition. Right now, they're entering month 9 of a war of attrition. They have always gambled on short, quick, hard wars. This is no longer in their hands. The enemy is controlling the tempo. And so their active duty soldiers and their reservists just simply don't have what it takes. They don't know these kind of wars. And by the way, another development is the decision of the government to continue the exemption of the Haredim, the Orthodox Jews, from army service, national service, which has really upset Haredim and they're now asking, why should I send my son or daughter into a battlefield? So if the Haredim law had been, the exemption had been removed, a lot of the Orthodox Jews would have left the country. Now that the Haredim still have their exemption, you might see a lot of secular Jews leaving the country. They're young adult kids in tow, just to spare their military service in which they have no experience or almost sure to die.
Give us your thoughts, Karim.
Yeah, I think it's highly likely that Israel will wage a war in Lebanon. If we talk logically and on papers, we say no, it's impossible. But Israel likes to punish its enemies, and it likes to punish its evil allies. And this is that happened before. They targeted an American ship. They bombed British soldiers previously. They did many things. They love to punish anybody who tries to stand against them, and Hezbollah is standing against them. So Halawan or how, nobody knows. And in the Israeli media, they are saying when we finish in Gaza, because in their mentality, they are still thinking that after maybe a couple of months or even if it takes years, we'll finish Gaza. And
they think the
second target is Lebanon. So the second target is Lebanon. How they wage it only in Air Force, they want to destroy Lebanon. They will try to invade. Nobody knows, but I think they will try their best to do it. And especially that nowadays we are seeing that from the Lebanese politicians that are aligned with the West, there are many people aligned with the West in Lebanon. They went out clearly in TV and they said we are willing to fight Hezbollah with the weapons. And they are hinting that Israel, if you want to start a war, we will be your soldiers on the ground and we are willing to fight Hezbollah. And that will really affect Hezbollah in Lebanon, because if you look at the map, Hezbollah strongholds only account of 25% of Lebanon, and Lebanon is a very small country. The rest, where the parties are against Hezbollah, they control the majority of the land. So that's my vision, and I don't see it's very far to see Israel waging a war in Lebanon. Maybe the Israeli Air Force, and we see Lebanese fighting Hezbollah in the ground.
I mean, I agree in one respect, because it was a question I kept posing to our speakers last night, was why isn't this the war? Why is nobody acknowledging that this is the war, or really very likely could be the war? Because Israel, like its U.S. ally, doesn't know how to exit, doesn't know how to back down, doesn't know how to de-escalate, continues on a trajectory, because really they've normalized the idea that military force should be used liberally and forcefully. And if the enemy is not getting the message, you just increase frequency and firepower. In that sense, I agree with you that anything. I mean, the Americans might try to jump in and save Israel by manufacturing a ceasefire of sorts, but that in itself at this point would be a massive strategic defeat for Israel. They have won nothing. They have lost so much, So I do tend to agree with Karim that Israel, once on the trajectory, will be able to wind back, particularly if Netanyahu sticks. And he won a number of these elections. I mean, he came in, with the largest amount of votes. So it's very likely that will continue indefinitely. But the moment they start that, we have many scenarios that will change. I mean, when Gaza started, many scenarios in this region changed. The entire resistance axis all took a part in this war for the first time, right? So if they go for Lebanon, many things are going to change in this region. For sure, U.S. embassies and U.S. military bases, low-hanging fruit with the munitions that the resistance has these days. Of course, they're going to be targets, especially if the U.S. is, continues to arm Israel to the degree it is today.
I mean, today, Amos Hochstein, the special envoy from the White House to the region, Hochstein, he's in Israel. And usually he goes to Israel, he comes to Lebanon, he meets with the officials, he takes a picture, and then nothing happens. Except when Iran offers to build a power plant. Then what happens is Lebanon doesn't get a power plant. But yes, I just want to go back a bit about the defeat that the Israeli army is facing. And to this post that we did in the Cradle a few days ago from the retired General Yitzhak Brick, who used to be the ombudsman of the Israeli army. And he said, we are facing a strategic defeat that we have not witnessed since the founding of the country, exactly to your point, Charmaine. And this is the same man who years ago, 2018, I think, was already warning that the Israeli army was an Air Force army, that the ground troops were completely incapable of fighting a war. Like this man has been sounding the alarm for years about this.
Correct.
Right now, since the genocide in Gaza started and since Israel lost control of the north, we have evidence now that the Israeli army is completely incapable. I mean, we have said it multiple times in the show. Hamas is the smallest faction in the resistance axis, and they're kicking Israel's ass in Gaza. Yes, Israel has destroyed Gaza, has flattened it, has killed many, many people, but militarily, they have achieved very little.
So, we were talking about this earlier, that, Israel's basically lost on land.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to anyone...
Yes.
Anyone who's impartial, looking at this, objectively looking at the situation, the region's mightiest army against the weakest link in the resistance axis until October 7.
Mm-hmm.
This is a resounding loss for Israel. So Israel's lost on land. And the Americans have lost at sea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first of all, their pier. Remember the pier we were talking about last time? This is a military pier. The U.S. military's cover has been blown. Now we know it's a military pier. Now the resistance is going to target it, and nobody will have anything to say about it. And guess what? The Americans are like, we're going to have to remove the pier that we spent $320 million plus damages, another $30 million, because of bad weather.
Well, and this interesting...
Basically, their cover was blown, so they removed the pier. But that's not the only way the Americans and the British have lost the sea. They have lost it because of Yemen, which is now targeting Israel-destined vessels in the Red Sea, the Indian Ocean, the Gulf of Aden, the Mediterranean. And the Americans now, last week, right, said, we spent over $1 billion on missiles. It sounded really low. A number of people are like, that sounds low. I mean, so... To defend against the Yemeni armed forces missiles against shipping going through in these waterways, and we're not successful. We haven't been able to make a dent.
What?
The fact. Oh, and then I gotta say, did you see like that the USS Eisenhower that was allegedly hit by twice, not once but twice in 24 hours? Major U.S. aircraft carrier that carried like 90 iconic one that carries like 90 aircraft on it, okay? Gets hit twice in one day by Yemeni missiles, doesn't show any pictures, pretends it doesn't happen, says the Yemenis are lying. And then today they put out on social media something about, we've introduced Taco Tuesdays on the U.S.
We're celebrating.
We're celebrating Taco Tuesdays, which was just like a little PR stunt to show, hey, see, we're afloat. But when Yemen this weekend hit, how many ships?
They had 6.
Okay, and then 2 of them sunk. That's what the Yemenis said, and this is what we could see with cameras. So it doesn't, the Yemenis seem pretty...
So they said one sunk, and one will eventually sink within hours.
So what's also sinking is, U.S. Support for the U.S. here in the region because, first of all...
credibility.
the U.S. is supposed to be the nation that provides security to everyone, right? They are the world police. And look at them now.
That's why I am breathing, because there's the United States.
The pier itself, there was when the numbers started coming out, about the fact that the food that was coming into the pier, which the World Food Program described as only 15 truckloads, it only made it to warehouses around the pier. It never made it into Gaza. It's just sitting there rotting, like the food that is rotting outside in Egypt and elsewhere. And they knew from the beginning that this pier could only function for a very short period of time because of high seas. They always knew this was a complete failed stunt to try to get deflect some of the blame from Biden. And then, yes, you have what's happening in the Red Sea, in which they say they have wasted, well, they don't say wasted, they have spent $1 billion at least just in countering the missiles. And there's a quote from the commander of the USS Laboon, which is one of these warships that is, apparently it's operating close. This is one of the warships that operates closer to the shore. And he says, I don't think people really understand just kind of how deadly serious it is what we're doing and how under threat the ships continue to be. And then he says, a different commander, he says that the attacks from Yemenis are every single day, every single watch, and some of our ships have been out here for 7+ months doing that. Now, a bunch of the ships that are in the Red Sea, because, okay, what you were saying, right, like the $1 billion figure is kind of low. It's completely low because it only accounts for projectiles. Because a number of the ships that are in the Red Sea, they were deployed for this mission. But then another chunk of them, they had been already in the Strait of Hormuz for months because they were deployed to counter the Iranian Navy when they were, seizing the oil ships there to counter sanctions, to kind of do tit for tat against what the U.S. does to them. So these are, thousands and thousands of troops. These are about a dozen warships, if not more, at sea for months on end, with no plan, with no end, with no strategy, with no victory, just failure after failure after failure. That doesn't account for the jets flying over Yemen and dropping bombs. That doesn't account for the drones flights across Gaza, because there's images that show the amount of overflights that U.S. and U.K. drones have been doing over Gaza every single day since October 7th. Every time the Israeli army hits a refugee camp or a hospital or any civilian gathering and then calls it a Hamas target, the information was coming from the West. It does come from there is complete complicity. You're never going to see this admitted, much less, the actual documents that show this.
So the New York Times did say that U.S. and U.K. recon drones were operating on, the captive rescue mission throughout.
Yes. So now you have 2 commercial ships, I think, that were sinking in the Red Sea because of Yemeni attacks. So, we mentioned it, right? Israel has lost on land and the U.S. is losing at sea. And then what do they have left?
Air. So, now Hezbollah has shown us some capabilities recently in terms of incoming Israeli aircrafts. And that would be?
Okay, so first, Hezbollah now they downed 5 Hermes 400 and Hermes 900 drones above Lebanon. They are like big drones for surveillance. And they fired 2 missiles on F-15 or F-16 plane and forced it to retreat from the Lebanese borders. And many experts, they are saying it's either SAM-7 or SAM-17. SAM-17 is the most quite capable. It's from the Soviet era, and it carries like 4 missiles. It's like military vehicles that carries missiles. And inside the vehicles, you have the radar and the control room and everything. And it's one-man show and one vehicle. And it's capable of downing American or Israeli jet planes or warplanes. But for me, I'm not optimistic regarding this because when Hezbollah opens their radar or their radios to target an airplane, Israeli at the same time will see where the radar is. So I think now it's highly likely that Hezbollah will not even try to down a military jet. They will only try to down drones because
I think you have to save the best for last.
Yeah, because as you said, everybody is saying this is not the war. Yeah, that's not the final war. And
it becomes the war if Israel.
If it becomes the war, we will see many surprises. Especially that I think there's no surprises from the Israeli side because they already reached the peak. And the surprises are only coming from the resistance, and mainly from Hezbollah and the Yemenis and the Iraqis, especially that the Yemenis and the Iraqis also, they are now making joint operations together at the same time in the Mediterranean Sea. That's a new thing. And of course, Hezbollah, they are introducing new weapons and use even surveillance weapons. The recent video shows how Hezbollah is capable to monitor and to take photos of any location in Israel, and it's full HD. It's really impressive. Me as Lebanese, I was proud. So currently, I don't think we will hear that an Israeli airplane was down. But as you said, if it becomes a big war, I think we will see more attempts to down an Israeli plane, and maybe Syria will be involved, because I don't think Hezbollah can do it alone, because you need radars, and radars are very important to track the airplane, and it's very easy for Israel to bomb a radar. Now, Syria is incapable, but of course it's one of the few nations in the Arab world that is like self-sufficient in this sector, and they have the manpower and the capability to down Israel, just because they are the only ones that did it before recently.
If the technology is there within the axis, it's shared by all. And now we're also looking at...
And there is a finger from Putin. They say, okay, you can do it.
Let's yeah, that's
because the technology is there. And he said that he gave them S-300 like years ago, but still we didn't see them. They are still using S-200 or Panzer.
Iran has also supplied Syria with anti-aircraft systems, and so we haven't seen those in play as far as I know. And if they're supplied it to Syria, why not Lebanon? And, one of the things also discussed yesterday is Lebanon is not reliant on, they were always, the Americans and Israelis were always trying to cut the routes through Syria and elsewhere to prevent weapon systems from getting into Lebanon. But now Lebanon is a producer of these munitions and technology. So that's another thing. Also, don't forget, when you're talking about Israel taking out Lebanon's massive radar and then the Syrian war, who's been taking out radars in the last months? Hezbollah has been taking out, like we discussed last time, all of Israel's eyes and ears on the border, which is why they've been able to do, successful strikes with more frequency and of higher quality and higher firepower inside Israel at key Israeli target bags, including surveillance systems, etc. So, they get to the more sophisticated stuff as time goes on. So the reverse is happening. And also, can you win a war without being on the land, in the air? The Israelis concluded they can't win a war from the air alone. Their army is amassed with just Gaza, and they're going to come into Lebanon with Hezbollah. These guys are going to cry. No, but they're going to cry when they see a Hezbollah fighter.
If their goal is to create chaos in Lebanon, they can. But if their goal was, or they declared that their goal is the same as they declared in 2006 to destroy Hezbollah, it's insane.
No. What do you mean chaos?
Chaos, I mean...
You mean just blow up Beirut?
Blow up certain stronghold areas for Hezbollah and drive the media against them. And of course, there's many militias in Lebanon. They are aligned with the West and Israel, and were created even by Israel, and they don't deny it. And you can go and read it. They are willing to fight Hezbollah, and they are there to fight Hezbollah. They are very clear. They say that Hezbollah don't look like us. This is not their Lebanon. This is our Lebanon. You are Iranis. We are ready to fight with you. And in the same like document or statement that they say that they release these parties, I don't want to name them because I don't want them to be important. They say we are ready to fight Hezbollah, and in the same document they say we are ready to make peace with Israel, and they are saying it nowadays.
These are Lebanese Zionists, and while they've been,
it's complicated.
It's complicated.
It's there. If you want to know how it's there, you need
here's, because you had this official, this one of these Zionist officials, a member of parliament that I think, won by the smallest amounts of vote possible. He said last week, we have 20,000 fighters at the ready.
ready to fight Hezbollah.
But that's complete bullshit. Where are these 20,000 fighters?
Do they have fighting experience?
In civil war, you don't need fighting experience. I don't think if, for instance, somebody bombed Hezbollah or targeted Hezbollah will send a drone to, for instance, Joni and bomb a building. Hezbollah is not like this.
Can these guys who've always been sucking at the American teat, how much money would it take to get these guys mobilized to create a civil war inside of Lebanon? You know, since I've been coming to this country, every time we're on the verge, oh my God, another, trigger event happens and everyone starts, it doesn't happen. And part of the reason is why the leaders of all these political parties are now old men. Okay, they were younger during the Civil War. They're tired. They always go to the precipice and then completely pull back and the whole situation disappeared. I don't know who would actually take on Hezbollah in this climate and survive.
They can close the roads. Not only on Hezbollah, let's invade the south of Lebanon. No, but because Lebanon is very far, and they did it. I think very damaging for the.
It's not permanent.
I know it's not permanent, but for instance,
the army comes in after a few days at the most.
Yes, let us be frank. If the war starts, for instance, let's say 1%.
The Lebanese army commander was in Washington D.C. last week. Yeah, and he's he just loves the American ambassador in Beirut.
Of course, he didn't go there and tell them, please don't wage war on us. You are Israel. Probably they called them, told them, if we wage war, what you can do for us.
No, it was, how can I be of service?
Yeah,
so let's be frank here. So, unfortunately, I want to talk.
Fortunately, the whole Lebanese army isn't like that.
I will be sectarian now. So, the stronghold of Hezbollah, they are Shias. Okay? If the Shias neighborhoods are bombed, though, of course, the Shias, they want to flee. Okay? Where usually they flee? What happened in 2006? Some of them, they flee to Christian areas and to other areas. Now, these areas that the Shias went to in 2006 is prohibited for them. It's very easy for the Lebanese, unfortunately, to imagine that Abbas having Shias running away from a war in the south and going to the north, and another militia, it might be whatever, Sunni, Christians, even Shias, but paid from the west and from Israel, they will execute them. That's what I don't want to see in Lebanon.
That's another era. I mean, people will respond differently. It's not the same trick over and over again. There are so many things that have fundamentally changed around this region very recently, and certainly in Lebanon. But I want to say, like last night during the space, Ibrahim Moussawi, like Hassan Nasrallah, repeated fiercely, if they hit our infrastructure, we hit theirs. If they hit our cities, we hit theirs. This is what will be different now. If the reason the Israelis have not listened to me.
For instance, if they watched a big war in all South Lebanon, they didn't target Beirut. So Hezbollah will target Al-Ain or Haifa.
No, what are they hitting?
I have a question for you.
They will
infrastructure, we hit theirs.
Maybe Israel is also smart. Give them
what
down.
What are you going to hit then?
For instance, they watched a big war in the south, and they start to kill civilians. And for instance, Tyre and other places, but not Tyre
to the north.
But it will not. But Tel Aviv will not be targeted.
No, but
around the militias will.
Tel Aviv is part of a
Karim, I have a question for you. Because everything you're saying, it stands on history. Like you're not just speaking from the gut.
Yeah,
not just like sectarianism.
And the 1978, it happened.
Yes, but it has happened on both sides. And both sides paid a price, and both sides suffered. And also, like what Sharmini is saying, I think it's completely valid. That is a different time. So here's my question to you. Because what we have seen in Lebanon before October 7 was also the activation of extremist groups. You know, what happened at Ain al-Helway in the Palestinian camp. This heavy fighting inside. There was a few months before that, there was like word of ISIS fighters coming in from the north via Tripoli, because Tripoli as well was at one point almost taken over by ISIS, if I'm not mistaken. So wouldn't it be more likely that instead of having, the same tired old men, Christian militias with their AK-47s from 20, 30 years ago?
They're all dumb.
Across, yes. In general, the ones that are more aligned with the U.S. Embassy is usually the Christian leaders.
But I'm saying all of them All of them were old men.
That's my question, like wouldn't it be even more likely that it's just they just start sending, ISIS, or they start sending, because, Lebanon shares a very porous border with Syria, where the U.S. is in control of it.
I just want to say, Hezbollah and the Lebanese army, but let's be honest, completely took out ISIS and Nusra in 9 days in Lebanon. When the political will was finally there and a decision was made, it took them 9 days to get rid of ISIS. It took the Syrian army, Syria is vastly larger. It took the Syrian army with its allies, including the Russian Air Force, Iran, Hezbollah, and other fighting forces, 3 months to wipe out ISIS. Like, you're wiping out ISIS that has, TOW missiles, like U.S. armaments, hardware, military hardware. And what's going to happen here?
Here, what's going to happen is that these militias are inside very important cities in Lebanon and Asian cities, and people, they are very highly educated and very civilized. We're not talking about ISIS. We are talking about a building that is like a room inside is like $1 million. But so it has people that are willing to go down to the street for free and fight Hezbollah, because the sectarian vibes
in not their neighborhood.
Yeah, where they will cut the roads. The roads is the most important thing. And if we go back to the history, 2006, one day after the war started between Hezbollah and Israel, the first thing that Israel did is it bombed every single road in Lebanon, and it did
every bridge
every bridge in Lebanon. So this plan is already there, and they tried it in 2006, and prior to that in 2078. I'm just putting a scenario here that says that also we have to be careful that there's people in Lebanon that are willing to fight Hezbollah, and they are present here, and they, even before the war, they did it in Tayuni, and people...
Yes, they are trying to incite. That's 100% sure. They're trying to incite.
Scenario.
But incite is different from going over the precipice. This is what we've seen every single time there's been a trigger incident that's, where sectarianism was flared up and people come out on the street with guns. It's gone within a few days. This may be different, but I'm saying these Lebanese Zionists, these pro-American Lebanese who have armed militias, how much are they willing to sacrifice for the Americans? This is the question. And by the way, if something like this happens, the Lebanese resistance will act, okay? But in my view, it will act not to kill other Lebanese. They don't want to get into that at all. There's one enemy. It's Israel. It's South. But it might go after the patrons of these Lebanese militias, which means evacuation of the U.S. Embassy, which means...
You have to wonder where...
Yeah, with you.
No, we will. It may be taking down all the British towers on the border with Syria. That's it. They said when we published the article, the investigation of the British watchtowers on the Syrian border, imagine that. We spoke to people in the resistance, and they were like, well, we're not going to do anything about them. But we will if the time comes and there's a reason to do something about them. And that will be the time. Yes. If the enemies, the West, starts to spark a Lebanese civil war, that's when the Americans and British should be nervous.
So I think the reality in Lebanon really is the fact that there's many, many pressure points. You have the Syrian displaced. You have the economy. You have the electricity. You have, if these Zionist groups or pro-Zionist groups decide to go to war with Hezbollah, you also need to wonder, where are the numbers coming from? Because Lebanon, sadly, is a country that exports people. So many people have left Lebanon.
And a lot of those people left. And these people are just loud, okay?
If there's a country in the world that has taught me that anything is possible, it's Lebanon. Because this is the impossible country, where the things that you don't think can happen, and it just goes on.
Lebanese have just lost all their money in the banking system, complete financial collapse of the country, somehow ticking on. They absorbed up to 2 million Syrian refugees. Kept ticking on, and the country is like a 5 million population. So, half their population added on. Literally, this country has been through everything. What's this? It's nothing.
We'll have to see.
So people mouthing off, look at how Lebanon has been able to absorb all these punches, all these internal domestic punches, and keep going. Whereas Israel has, this war, and we're seeing a collapse on many different fronts internally. Okay, people leaving, people being displaced en masse. They're unable to handle it. I've always said, we in the global South have been the recipients of so many wars against us that we can handle these discomforts. Okay, for an extended period, we're seeing, but the West cannot.
Because Lebanon is for the Lebanese, and Israel is for the Palestinians, so it's not even theirs to stay there.
But they cannot sustain this kind of prolonged conflict. Whereas Lebanon, literally, what haven't we seen? The port exploding. Like anyone who's lived here through all these incidents over the last few years, and still hasn't left. And by the way, people did leave, but many came back.
Yes, and also one thing about the port explosion is that it's pretty common among Lebanese to blame Israel for that as well. Like many people are convinced that is Israel. It was the U.S., which is, we have investigations about this as well. So it's a history of seeing the bigger powers, just mess with you and mess with you and mess with you. And you will hope that at this point we're finally, and I include myself because I am married to a Lebanese, that we are ready to move forward and forge a new path.
So I just wanted to mention something that's happening on Twitter. That's what we found out recently. Maybe there's other pictures that have the same issue. So there's a photo from October 7, Nova Festival, and it's a photo of cars being burned out. And we all know that Israeli Apache helicopters are the ones who bombed the Nova Festival parking lot, because, of course, individuals with AK-47 can't do such damage. And we have many articles confirming this from Israeli media and from Israeli officials and soldiers. Yet, when you go to Elon Musk's X and post this picture, we will be met with a community note saying that this was already debunked in November last year by basically every major news source in multiple countries.
Western news source.
Basically every...
Yes, that's what it says. And there's a bunch of links. And Elon Musk told us that the community notes are written by real people and you can apply for it. But what are we seeing here is that automatically this picture, whenever you post it, and whoever who posts it will see the same community
the same message exactly.
The same message exactly. For instance, there's a guy who says that Hamas blew up all these cars, and he put the pictures, and yet the community guide note says that this was debunked and that Israel didn't blow it, although he's saying Hamas. And we have a bunch of these, but I selected like...
So the reason people are doing this are now mocking.
Yes, they are mocking.
By putting the most outrageous tweets on top of the picture.
Yeah, for instance, this guy, he says Elon Musk is not a pedophile. And it's funny because you read on Twitter, this was already debunked in November. And then you see somebody who's saying the Air Force of Gaza, run by Hamas, is the one responsible for this. And you see this was already debunked. And there's many others, like George Bush was elected as a president, and then you read that this was already debunked. And there's a bunch of these. So it's very interesting. If you're on Twitter, please go and put the picture and see what happens.
Free speech.
Free speech.
But I think that's all the time we have for this week. This has been a very great discussion. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for leaving a like, for subscribing. Make sure to share this video, to follow us on Instagram, on X, on Telegram. And please, if you're feeling generous, make sure to leave a donation on our Patreon for the Cradle News Roundup. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmeen Narwani.